Then we get into joints. Joints are going to be an articulation where two or more bones meet. So our joints allow our bones to bend and they allow us to move. Without joints, we wouldn't actually be able to move as easily as we can move now. So they allow for mobility. Our joints are classified in two different ways. They're going to be classified functionally and structurally. So functionally is going to be how they work. Structurally is what they're made out of, right? And these classifications kind of run together. You'll see that on the next slide. All right, next we get to our functional and structural classification of joints. So how I did this is I put these all in one kind of graph together. So we're going to start looking at this top group, which I'm going to actually draw a line right here separating them. We're going to start looking at this top group. And when we look at this side is functional. This side is structural. Okay, for the different classifications. So for our functional classification, we go for synarthroses, which are immovable. Then if we go down, we have amphiarthroses, which are next, which are slightly movable. And at the bottom, we have diarthroses, which are freely movable. So we're talking about the different amount of mobility within a joint. If we look at those joints structurally, you have fibrous joints. So these are joints that are filled with some kind of fibrous tissue. Then we have cartilaginous joints. These are joints that are filled with cartilage. And then we have our synovial joints, which are joints that are filled with synovial fluid. All right, but both of these kind of classifications can run together. So your synarthroses, these up top, are also your fibrous joints. These are joints that don't move at all. This is things like the sutures in your skull. Those don't move. Those are knit together, right? Or you have the joint between like the radius, the tibia and the fibula, right? Between the tibia and fibula, there's a joint there because the bones are touching, so they're jointed. But there's not movement in that joint, and it's kind of connected together or knit together by some fibrous connective tissue. So those are going to be synarthroses. When you go down a level, you then get to your amphiarthroses. So we're now at this one. Amphiarthroses are going to be your slightly movable joints. These are joints that are cartilaginous joints in structure, right? So these ones are going to be things like the joints between your vertebrae that have fibrocartilage in there, and between your hip bones where the pubic symphysis is, right where the hip bones meet, that is also a cartilaginous joint or an amphiarthrosis. They don't have a lot of movement, but they do move a little bit. And then our last one are our diarthroses down the bottom here. So our diarthroses are going to be our freely movable joints, and our freely movable joints tend to be our synovial joints when we look at the structure of them. These are joints like your shoulder. These are the joints that when you think joint, you're talking about synovial joints. We have a little bit more about synovial on the next slide, but does this make sense? So we have functional classification, structural classification, and we go from no movement to slight movement to freely movable. And if you look at structure, it's going to be a fibrous joint, a cartilaginous joint, or a synovial joint. All right, so lastly is our synovial joints. So there are 6 different types. And these are the joints that you can move all on their own, or you can move freely, right? And they have different types of movement depending on what joint you're talking about. So if we go through these, my first one that I've written down is a plane joint, which would be this one down here. Okay, a plane joint is 2 flat surfaces that are going to, so here's a drawing of it, 2 flat surfaces up against each other. And they move in a little bit of direction. Think of your wrist, right? So it can go front and back and slightly side to side, but not really, right? So it's going to have a little bit, the front and back, and a little bit of side to side movement. If you hold your forearm and move your wrist around, you can see it. It moves almost in one direction more than the other, and front to back. That's going to be a plane joint. It's 2 flat surfaces on each other. Next one is a hinge joint. Hinge is going to open like a door. Okay, so your elbow, this one, your elbow is your hinge joint. Your elbow can shut and it can open up to straight. It doesn't go past straight. Another hinge joint would be your knee. That's going to be hinge joint, right? Your legs can bend, can fold under you and then open up to straight, but they don't go past that motion. After that, you get your pivot joint. So the pivot joint is going to be radius and ulnar. If you look at your radius and ulnar, if you put your hand out flat, palm up, right? And then you turn it till your palm down, that actually causes your radius to roll around your ulna, which is a pivot joint. All right, it rolls around like that. Your neck and your head is also a pivot joint, right? Remember we talked about the dens? Your head rotates around the dens. Then you have a condylar joint, and that would be the joint of your fingers. That's up here. So if you look at where your fingers connect to your palm of your hand, those are condylar joints. All right. They open and shut. They have slight side to side motion, but not a ton. Then you have a saddle. Saddle joint is at your thumb. All right, your thumb moves different than your fingers. There's absolutely no twist in a saddle joint because it's like taking two saddles and putting them upside down on each other. And that's how it forms. If you want to ask me about that in class, I can show you in more detail what that means. And then the last one is ball and socket. Ball and socket is one we all know. It's your arms, that's your hips. It has the biggest range of motion in the most directions is your ball and socket joint. So write down any questions you might have. Ask me about them tomorrow or next time we have class. And thank you for listening to the lecture.